And magazines are really kind of brutal and difficult to get into these days. They're becoming very selective, and also there's a lot of good work.
Yes.
An abundance of good in the residential space, especially.
But it misses the conversation sometimes as well. It's so edited, and it is about the image and the and how they sort of choose imagery based on their direction. So as actually the author of the architecture, you have very little say in how it's represented. It's kind of like you're sort of very far down the sort of order in terms of having a say in how it sort of comes out. Yeah.
Well, we typically start with where you're from, but let's just continue this part of the conversation for a bit because I think it's interesting. So, I think you're right. And the publication process takes such a long time. And then, you're only limited to a handful of images, which I feel like for you guys who do incredible work and some of the projects you have are larger scale, it must be really difficult to select the 3 or whatever number it is for publication and then find the words to express all of the, I'm sure, robust ideas in a project too. And then boil it down to whatever.
And it is. I think, the designs that are recorded and photographed are results of years of work, years of collaboration with client and other fantastic sort of contributors and from contractors and things like that. So it all comes together, and then that energy and blood, sweat and tears sometimes ends up as sort of 3 still images in a magazine. And that summary is, it can be very powerful. It can be, it can be succinct and it captures the spirit of the design. But there's always, when we look at the summary, we think, that it didn't show this, or it didn't understand this, or it didn't sort of try to communicate this. And maybe it's just silly to think that photography can ever do that. But then, and we were just discussing the different mediums for communication of architecture and ideas shouldn't just be photography and conversation so critical. It's the thinking behind what was achieved, that not just what it looks like, but how does it perform? How do people live in it? Has the prototype that you've built for your clients fulfilled their aspirations for a lifestyle that you imagine together and you've constructed and brought together? Because I think the buildings are these stories that start in conversation and they're developed, and I think sometimes we talk about the sort of comparison to the film industry and and the sort of idea that there's this screenplay that you sort of start to develop in your conversations with your clients, and as you define that and you talk about, isn't that a fantastic capture of where we're heading, and then you develop thinking. But if you capture the essence of what you're trying to create, you always know, as you sort of find parts or participants along the way, whether they're amplifying it or reducing its theme. And I've completely gone off script, but we were talking about sort of photography and how to capture our buildings, and more often also we're starting to share through sometimes publication or just through social media the sketching, the prototyping, the thinking that is on the table as we're conceiving these buildings, and I think that's really interesting, and I find it interesting when I see or look at posts of other designers when they share the steps between starting a project and completing it, and see how they are creating. Visibility to the creation process is fascinating.
Yeah, sometimes that stuff is more interesting than the polished piece that's gets put out. That's just a couple pages. And what we should do on here is actually, I don't know if architects would be interested, but have offices and do like a project presentation session. That would be a lot of fun. That would be cool. And give someone like a full hour and a half to just talk about one project.
I think that would be fascinating, because I think we try to do it internally, and it's part of the architectural sort of education process. The idea of critting, pinning up ideas, sharing the thinking, and and discussing and analysing the thinking, not just running to the output. And I think the studio we're in, we try and do that as much as possible. There's huge visibility of work in progress in a digital world where information really is stored in file trees and servers, and it disappears. We have a very manual display of thinking. We use tape and printed images and 3D printed models, and if you walk into our office like I had just an hour or so ago, it's chaotic. It's filled with
Hmm.
ideas in process, but it is an amazing way to come into the office and capture the energy of yesterday visually, and see all the
Hmm.
thoughts, some of them are scribbles, some of them might be reference, some of them might be materials. And I look at offices, and some of them are absolutely beautiful, and they're sort of I think I saw years ago Norman Foster's office, and it was beautiful. It was back when everyone was working, and I don't know how they did with the software that we use. They were working on Macs, and it was like everything was white. The desks were white, and there were this rows of beautiful iMacs, and nothing. No, there was no paper. Everyone was
Right, right.
digitally engaged, and and as beautiful it is, the visibility of their thinking and their creation was not there. There was no signs unless you went over and looked over someone's shoulder on a screen and sort of leant in. You couldn't see the creative process. And that is so counter to our office. Obviously, we work digitally and everyone has screens, but the sharing of information and the pinning up of ideas, and the sketching, and the sessions that we have around table, that information, when we're in the design process, can't be invisible. It has to be there. You have moments where you're sort of being highly creative, and there's lots of drawings and lots of paper, and then you come back in the next day, and you don't have to search for that thinking. It's there. It's visible. It's definitely a little bit tidier than the night before, but it's captured and it's pinned up. And I think that, and then it kicks your day off. You're like, oh, that's right. We were thinking that's where we were. Or the other thing that I love that we're doing more and more is we had a time where we stopped doing it. We're 3D printing again, and we're producing
Mm.
these small models. Sometimes, when we're in the early phases of a building and the landscape, the building is very elemental. It doesn't try and do too much, but it talks to its position in land and landscape. And then we have other models where we're much more developed, and we're looking at facades, and how the detail of the facade might sort of hang off the building. So, but there's such visual tools, and I find when they're placed and they're sitting in my peripheral vision, they might not be what we're working on together at that time, but the visibility of them means that those moments where your mind wanders or your eyes wander, you capture a glimpse of them, and you look at it, and you pick it up, and you rotate it, and you think about it, and you put it down, and you participate in a process of design that I don't think happens in the three-dimensional digital modeling world,
Mm.
or or
Mm.
or if it does, it happens in a window that is so, you make such a conscious decision to click that file open, and move into a position where you have a frame to look at something, which is, and that's what screens are. They're these portals that take you into spaces, but they're such small portals. The
Mm.
environment of a creative studio, and I remember when I was studying and seeing images of Frank Lloyd Wright's studio, and the screeds of paper and people drawing, and the visibility of the production and work, and it was incredible because there was a sense of visible creation. Sorry, I don't know if that was the
Hmm.
question, but that's where we went. I just
I don't know either, but I loved it. That was fantastic. Yeah, the visibility of the production, the creativity. That's a great way to put it, and I think it's true. It's sort of, as you were talking, when COVID happened, everyone was working remotely, and there's the impact and what it was like to work remotely from the creative standpoint, like you mentioned. But there's also a discussion of more like office culture as a
yes,
topic, and you need those serendipitous moments to just kind of pass by someone for social reasons or for office culture
yeah,
reasons. But I think what you're saying is almost the same exact thing. It's the same kind of relationship you have with a physical model or a drawing. Instead of it being a person for social reasons, it's now just a model or a drawing for, let's say, creative reasons. And it all, even if it's in like the periphery, I buy into what you're saying. Like even if it's in the periphery, it has some kind of impact on you. And if you can glance at it real quick during your break or during when you're thinking about something else, it helps
mm,
keeps things loose. I think also practically it helps you remember what the heck you've done
absolutely,
because it's easy to
yeah.
forget in the computer. You just iterate and then you lose track of up and down, left and right, before and
Yeah,
after.
you're right, because it's so fast and you can copy paste, and do that. The commitment to freezing yourself for a moment. 3D printing is a really good way to do that. That you actually make a commitment. I'm gonna execute that, and we're gonna look at that as an object, and we're gonna understand it. We had a fantastic presentation yesterday, and we presented a design that I was a little bit nervous because it was a design that has a silhouette or a form in an incredible landscape that is unlike anything that we've done before or would be familiar in this landscape. So it was a little bit there was some bold thinking, and and we presented this design, and it was fantastic. We had such a great response. But we were talking about the roof, and the roof has a sense of levitation and support, being unsupported almost.
Hmm.
And the client was we were talking about how to, beyond the vision, how to achieve this. And they were sort of saying, you see so many renditions of buildings digitally where they're defying gravity and doing all sorts of extraordinary things, and then the challenge is to build it and engineer it and achieve it. And there's so many clever people that can make things that appear to have a different relationship to gravity to the one that I know. And you go, well, that's clever. But what we were discussing was actually the way that we presented the scheme was a 3D model, and the model, because it was a physical object, had to obey gravity. It couldn't lie. It was on the table, and
Right.
this roof, which from some viewing angles looks like it was impossibly supported, actually needed to be supported, or the presentation would have been a flop. So we, in our modelling, actually developed the thinking behind how could we support this roof. Where could structure sit in a way that it was, and didn't take away from the drama of this element. And we developed in our conceptual thinking quite a strong structural strategy, that was sort of woven into the architecture, and the support of the roof was actually integrated in a way that wasn't highly visible, unless you sort of made some time to look at it and go, oh, that's how it's been supported. But the fact that it was a physical model meant we had moved from the digital world where gravity doesn't exist and you can make anything float and fly, and we'd committed to building a little model. And in our process, I think we built 3 or 4 models, and we printed them, but they had to have a foundation that considered how would it be built, how would structure be in balance with the sort of the tension of suspension and things like that. So it was, and it was a really good conversation, because I think the process of being an architect and creating something that will be built needs to think about building something physical very early on, and making a model and printing
Hmm.
a model is physical, and it has to obey gravity. It has to, it has to, conform to, a, a, a physical realm. And so that was, yeah, just and I thought about it, since the meeting, but and it relates to a number of topics in the discussion that we might have today about the design process, the education of designers, and how people are taught, and what and processes that they experience and are made aware of. But and I think the tools that are available to us are so vast now compared to I did my education, and we were one of the first generations to really, I think, be exposed to CAD, but we still had drawing boards, and um, the tools are incredible now. People can pick up tools and simulate, and with AI appended to it, create visualizations that are so incredible. I think the thing that this sort of little conversation to me that is so important when you're thinking about designing as an architect, that you don't forget that you're going to physically create something at the end of this process, that you're moving towards a create a result that isn't digital, that is tangible, tactile, physical, and will stand. And that thinking, I think, which seems basic, is lost sometimes.
Yeah, sure. Yeah,
it's
yeah.
like, really,
Right.
right. So, yeah.
I think it goes back to something you said earlier, which is the truth is that in a lot of the computer programs, there's no, or all of them, there's no gravity. There's a ground, so when we orbit, we're not completely distorted, but there's no gravity, so it's really easy to be like further distanced from reality when you're working that way. There's almost not even any need to think about reality if you're just working in the computer, and especially also maybe if you're these are generalizations, but if you're a younger architect or architectural designer out of school, and a lot of times school is more conceptual. The things you do are like literally floating in the air as a conceptual project. And then, I mean, I remember when I transitioned to practicing, I was hit with the reality of structure, of budget, of schedule, of all these things. And you're like, oh my God, it's actually really hard to design a building that looks really cool, right? Like we would do in school, but have it perform in all these very, very serious and real ways. It's a really big challenge, honestly, and it's not one you tackle in school, and it takes a long time to learn.
To achieve our buildings, you have to conduct so many things, and you need to conduct compliance, approvals, budgets. You have to be so considerate of the environment and the materials that you specify, the longevity of your decisions, and materials that are better environmentally and last longer are more expensive. So you're asking your client to make commitments that are on top of already larger commitments, and you are conducting so many things, and to bring it together, because the success of the building has got so many different measures. It has to obviously look fantastic and perform fantastically. It has to be delivered so that there's a sense of satisfaction in terms of the financial model that the client sort of had set, and the parameters for the project doesn't exceed a boundary where it isn't enjoyable. As beautiful as it looks, it's cost too much, and it hasn't met those constraints. And so you and that's fascinating, because, like, as you say, when you are being educated about design and what being an architect as a professional might mean, your visibility to all of those factors is limited. I mean, and it probably should be. I think that's the other thing. I think there's a
Yeah. Yeah.
if you knew all the things that you had to juggle to achieve a building, I don't think anyone would come back for the second day. If they presented it on the first day, you'd have an empty room the next day. Everyone, this is ridiculous. Why would I come back? There's other things to do, and I wouldn't blame them. There's a so I think that naivety is actually a good thing, because I think it means that
Yeah.
you can educate and you can build um, or skills or talent in areas that have the foundation and design and and creative processes. And I think that in my memory of architecture school, that's how it started, and then technology and the technical start feeding into
Mm.
that. And it probably has that hierarchy of sketching, thinking, imagining, and then the technical enables that thinking to be achievable. But
Hmm.
if the weight of running a business, because that's the other thing, there's
Oh, yeah. There's another
yeah,
one.
there's the
Yeah.
practicing as an architect, but running a business, paying the bills, dealing with the tax department, and all of those things. Which is what all business owners have to navigate. So it's not unique to architects, but it is. It's there's so much that you need to understand. And I think, yeah, and we started our architectural practice. I think I was 6 months out of finishing my university degree, and Jeff and I decided very young to let's just go and start up
Really?
an architectural practice. And the reason that we did it was probably being naive. We didn't really know how far you could fall, or yeah,
Are
or we were so young that we didn't actually have far to fall. We didn't have
right, right, right,
we didn't have
right.
mortgages, we didn't have kids, we didn't, at that point, if things didn't work out, we'd just get up the next day and do something else. So there was potentially an opportunity, and actually being so young in our professional careers, it meant that it actually didn't have the barriers that it might have had if we did it later. Yeah.
Are you and Jeff roughly the same age? I mean, were you both fresh out of school deciding to
Jeff's
do
a couple of
this?
years older than me, so he'd actually
Okay.
he'd been working in a studio for a few more years, and that's sort of really how we met. I'd finished my university degree. Jeff had been working in a studio for a couple of years, and then I was offered a role there, and and yeah, and so we actually didn't work on projects together. We 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 spoke and we talked about design, and we realized that we had a lot of similar views and alignments. And then a few months after starting, I realized I didn't like working in the studio. I didn't like um, I didn't like the environment. It wasn't a healthy place to work. And that
Hmm.
potentially, when you're young and out of university, there's a sort of sense of, oh, it's never going to be like a rose garden. You've got to, you put the effort in and, do the hard work. It actually, it was more than that. It was an environment where I had this opportunity through university to be, highly creative. I was offered a job
Hmm.
because I thought I had that talent, and I had a fantastic sort of folio as I left university. But then I was put in an environment where I froze. I couldn't. The expectations and the way that I was expected to sort of work just um, didn't enable me to do anything that I thought I had confidence in doing. So, but anyway,
Hmm.
that's another story. The benefit of being in a place that I didn't like was I was motivated to do something else, and this is what we did. So I'll forever thank that experience. Or the fact that it wasn't a great experience. It kicked Jeff and I into something that has been great. Yeah.
I mean, even with Jeff being a few years older than you both still started the practice, pretty early on. It's not uncommon for architects to graduate practice for 5 to 10, maybe even longer years, depending on the scale of the work too, and then pivot and do
Yeah.
their own thing. And there's always this thought that obviously there's a lot to learn as a practicing professional architect, and one would assume that to gain that knowledge you'd have to work at an office or a few offices for on the magnitude of 5 to 10 years, and then you're knowledgeable enough to go start your own thing is one train of thought. But to be honest, I've because we started our practice similarly, after practicing in other offices for a number of years. And I've on occasion looked back and wondered, like, was that the best route, or would it have been better to start 6 months or a year out of school? And it's a coin toss. I'm not entirely sure. I mean, to each their own, and everyone's different, but I'm not entirely sure, because there's a lot you can learn just on your own too, if you're hungry enough.
You have to learn, and that's the other thing. Like
that's true.
It's a survival thing. So if you don't know it, you're going to spend most of that night figuring it out. So the next day you'll at least be halfway there. I think I don't think that there's a right or wrong way, and it depends on different circumstances. But the thing that is absolutely critical, whichever path you take, is you need work. And so the decision for us was benefited by the fact that both Jeff and I had been approached to do work sort of off the books, if outside of our professional work, and could you do these? And they were two beach houses, and that was also an opportunity. So when we decided that we would go and set up our business, it actually was with the foundation of, well, I've got this private job and I have this private job. Well, I said, well, that's a business. If we combine those two, let's go and do them. And so we were lucky enough to have built relationships with people that had been interested in us and wanted to take some risk with us, because we didn't have a track record. We didn't, but we had enthusiasm, we had some energy, and that was fantastic. So it meant that we were busy straight away. We had effectively a year to do the design for these two projects before construction needed to start. And those projects for us were highly successful. They were photographed. They won awards, both of them, and that catapulted us into our next round of work by the visibility of those projects being sort of published. So it was fantastic. Wow. And it was and we haven't ever looked back. We haven't ever doubted that what we did was right. We like I said, we were naive. We just started working, and we surrounded ourselves with fantastic mentors and advisors. The world of architecture, and I actually think about this now, even in our professional careers. If you reach out to other architects, the people that we've dealt with, and when we were young, are so giving of their advice, their time.
I agree.
There is a sense of community within all of the architects I know. And so when we were young, there were people that we respected that were in their sort of twilights of their sort of careers that actually had time to sort of talk to us and mentor us and tell us about their experiences. It was always quite pleasant, because they were never trying to tell us, because they saw that we were trying to forge our own path, but they were able to share their experiences, and and that ranged from sort of not just design, but sort of navigating tricky clients and getting paid, and all the other things that we really didn't understand. But now I think about where we work, and we're fortunate that we're based in New Zealand, but we work around the world, and we have work in so many different countries, which means that when we go to these other countries, I'm always desperate to meet other architects and talk to them about practice and understand the different sensibilities that sort of affect practice in different places. And I think being in Los Angeles a couple of weeks ago and having fantastic lunch with an architect, Michael Kovac from Kovac Studio, who's become a
Oh yeah.
great friend, um, then that happens in lots of places around the world where we go. We just we meet these people that practice in different places, and we benefit from their sharing. I mean, we've been working in the States for a number of years, but we've worked in the States always realizing that we're an outsider. We come from a different part of the world, and that our knowledge pool and our connection with sort of consultants and other people isn't the same as it might be if we just worked locally in New Zealand. But the people are so sharing. Michael has always been able to sort of say, oh, if you need a consultant, this is the person we would talk to in this area, and those bonds and conversations build, and we've done for the Palisades rebuild a little project with Kovac Studio under the sort of case study 2 banner, which has been fantastic, a little collaborative design. So and so things spring off these relationships, and in the phase of professional career that I'm in now, I, I just love I love designing, but I love the specialness of these relationships that we're building with people in different places, and what those might lead to. Yeah.
That's wonderful. I agree entirely with the the point that the community is quite helpful toward each other, and I think it felt like for a period of time, at least in my exposure, that the architecture community was maybe more competitive within itself more than anything else. But what's one of the pieces of advice I'm always giving to younger architects or people who are just graduating is like, you should just reach out to the architect. Reach out to, if you're not sure about whatever, just cold call somebody, cold email
Yeah.
them, and you'd be maybe surprised. Like 90% of the time, they will get back to you and be like, yeah, sure, let's go grab lunch. You'll probably get a free lunch out
Yes.
of it, if anything.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think that because the thing that I actually admire is the initiative for someone to actually do that,
Yeah.
sort of back themselves. There was a call yesterday from a student that was trying to get hold of me, that was a friend of a friend, and they got my phone number, and they rang me, and they wanted to come in and meet and talk about what we did, and that was great. Good on them. Let's have a chat. Let's find out what they're doing and where they're going, and the other
Mm.
thing that we are delighted and so excited by is we through the studio we have lots of interns that move through the studio, and actually most of them come from the other side of the world, and
Mm.
their thinking, their experiences, their view on design is it's so fascinating, because they're 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 in different worlds, they're in different cultures, um, they're a part of their creative career creative career where they haven't got the weight of probably some of the experiences that, although I think my mind is free and agile and unburdened, I think you do over time. You carry lots of experiences, good and bad, but
Yeah.
there becomes a weight to your world,
Mm.
and fresh eyes, young eyes. It, when we're designing, and our process in the studios with the interns is that they're welcome to the table anytime. They're welcome to a client
Mm.
presentation. They're welcome to a client briefing, and I love that. I love that they, and we introduce them. They're not in the back room filing, 8-year-old sort of
Yeah.
sketches. They participate. They and they and I think for their professional development, it's amazing. They have visibility to things that I can imagine when I was in their position, you just didn't really know, how does this go? How do you communicate a design to a client? How do you respond to feedback? How do you sort of counter? And so they're in the front row, but then we notice, so there's this period where they come into the office, and we're a little bit unsure how they're going to go. They're young, but they flourish, I think, because we provide that sense of opportunity and confidence for them. After a day or two, they start to just, they shine. They show ideas. They put their hand out. They say, I can do that. I'll contribute, and it is so delightful when you see their world, or you start to understand their world and their thinking.
Hmm.
So we we get a lot from it, because I think that sort of the sense
Hmm.
is an internship is a one-way process where interns are coming in to sort of be sponges for the knowledge that we might have sort of built up, but it's reciprocal. We love their their
Right.
energy, their vision, their thinking, um, and yeah, it is definitely something that we think feeds our youthfulness as well. As we get
Right.
grey
Right.
hairs, and there is a sense of um, that yeah, that energy and fresh vision that I think is really encouraging. Yeah,
I mean, if you're getting as much out of it, it's probably a sign that you're doing it, hosting the interns and providing internships in the right way, as opposed to locked in the back like you were describing.
yeah.
So, for some context here, how large is the studio? Like, how many people do you have? I guess with accounting and not counting
I think
interns.
we hover around 20 people, and that's sort of,
Okay.
with
Yeah.
people going on things like maternity leave and things like that, it sort of fluctuates. But that's our happy place. We've discovered that if we get much more than that, there's a pressure to sort of commercial operations that start to mean that you've got to get more projects done per month, or more client presentations, and the ratio of administration to creative sort of balances, and it's probably not an exact formula, but we've through the years of practice we've had, we've found that there's a threshold before we, as a creative studio, which has the sense of everyone being in the room and designing together, which has a lovely sense of intimacy. Beyond 20, it sort of becomes, oh, what's happening at the other end of the room, which I don't like. Yeah,
Right.
yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. We've talking with a lot of architects, spoken with a lot of architects, and worked at various places. And it's interesting. 20 to 23 or 4, if you're counting a few admin people as well, seems to be like a magic
Yeah,
number. And from what I've seen, a lot of the offices who do exceptional work are about that size. It's not saying you can't be smaller and do exceptional work, or you can't be bigger, but it tends to be that's like the magic body of about a count of
yeah.
people for there to be this kind of resonance,
I think so.
and then it
Yeah,
dissipates.
because and it fascinates me. I see these huge studios, and they do incredible work. But the thing that I don't understand is that sense of common vision, common energy. How do
Yeah.
you conduct that? And most of these businesses obviously have a division that might do stadium, a division that might do something else. So they I
Right.
think they still bundle people into those sort of the scalable sort of, are they 20? I don't know, but I think there's a scale of, where you can sort of
Yeah.
operate where at some point you need to sort of be a sort of a bundle of 20s, or something like that. But I think we're lucky that in our bundle we don't have to say this part of the bundle specializes. We're lucky that we work across a number of different typologies of work, which is from residential to retail to small hotel to commercial, boutique commercial, to repurposing. So we are rich
Hmm.
in diversity, and we're actually very rich in location and place. I think this week
Yeah.
we've had job inquiries from Hong Kong, New York, and Georgia, and I had to look at a map to see where
Georgia.
Georgia was. But I knew I was
That's
near,
fair.
you know, um,
The
Turkey,
the middle.
Turkey or somewhere, and
Oh,
not
Georgia. Okay.
Georgia, US, no, Georgia, Europe. So, so it's exciting. We get to sort of, you know, have,
Do you ever wish that you had a higher so first question is, what percentage of projects are in other countries versus being local to you? And the second question is, do you ever wish that more of them were local, just so, I don't know, it was easier, you
Make
could
your
get
life simpler.
yeah,
your life was simpler, less flying,
yeah.
whatever.
Um, I think in terms of ratio, although we're the studio's in Auckland, which is in the North Island of New Zealand. Most of our work in New Zealand is actually in the South Island, which is the more mountainous area, Alpine. A lot of the work. There's a city called Queenstown. Um, and that's almost, it is like another country. It's very different to the North Island. Um, so we're used to traveling. And traveling's a vital part of what we do. We can do lots of things remotely, and we can use digital tools to um, have a much better understanding of site and conditions than we ever
Mm.
have had to. But traveling is part of what we do, and it's not just what Jeff and I do; it's what the teams do. Um, but it's fun. It's kind of like this is our home base, but everyone's preparing expeditions. On Monday morning, we have a discussion around travel: who's going where are they off to, who's going to be in the office. But it does. It feels like they're expeditions. They're off um, to new places, to new environments, and that is exciting. It's we've just finished a small project in Seoul and um, in South Korea that we executed in a very fast manner over sort of a 6 month period. So that was another fascinating one, and I sort of travelled up there a lot, but also other parts of the team were moving backwards and forth. The west coast of the States is definitely some place that we frequent, but we've got a new project in New York, which is exciting, and so um, I, I think the other thing, because someone asks us about working in different places and different parts of the world, and the questions relate to the challenges of it and the excitement of it.
Mm.
But the thing that I think about, because we work in so many places that aren't our backyard, or our neighborhood, we have a different sensitivity to place when we discover or go to these places. We want to learn. We are very interested in learning about, the history of the place, the people of the place, the geology of the place, and so that inquisitiveness is, and the research before we jump to designing, and and beyond what the client might be asking us to achieve, which is normally a certain
Yeah.
amount of bedrooms and living rooms, and there might be some Pinterest
Right.
images that sort of bundle their direction. We're seeking a much broader understanding than that. We are so fascinated in place and environment and context, because I think our
Hmm.
buildings and how we design have to respect all of those components. We can't be,
Hmm.
and it's potentially a sensitivity that I have. We can't be the foreigners that have come into town and think they know everything, because we don't. We know nothing. We are
Yeah.
lucky to be invited into this special place. We're from outside. We're outsiders, and outsiders, sometimes aren't welcome, because why would an architect from New Zealand have any sense of ability or authority to design on the Californian coast. This person, what would they know? They come from the bottom of the world. And so I'm sensitive to that. So to counter that, we
Mm.
go beyond just trying to understand what the client wants. We want to know everything about the area, and that fascination and that thinking, I think, means that we have a different approach to designing. We bring a set of thinking and ideas that probably have a uniqueness because of where we were from. We're from this little series of islands at the bottom of the world, and we've grown here and we've designed in these environments. So there's something I think special about the sort of the nurturing and the way that we've sort of grown and built our design careers here. But as we export that thinking, there's this sensitivity to being an outsider and needing to learn and that, like we're saying, that it's not just online research. That's relationships, that's meeting people, meeting other architects,
Mm.
and to that other point about the
Mhm.
community of architects around the world, and the openness and the giving that we are so lucky to receive. So we we find ourselves in these different places, and we dive into it. We dive into so many different parts of it, and try and understand it, and let the design and the creative process have that foundation as a really important part of us feeling confident to design in those places, because we haven't been blasé or naive. We have invested
Mhm.
in the place.
It would almost seem like it would be a really weird and difficult task to design a project in another place for you guys if you don't do it that way.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's for us and some other architects we're speaking with. Like, there's a certain kind of initial steps you take to understand what you're about to do, the framing of the problem, the research, the understanding the site, these kinds of things. And I was thinking, I was talking to a client. I'm like, it's like impossible for us to like just design something without doing that first. Otherwise, I'm just going to sketch something random, I
Yes.
guess. And it's a very uncomfortable
Well,
thing
there
to
is
be.
a sense of responsibility,
Well, that's
right?
true.
Like I feel like if you care about what you do, like I don't know, like a doctor before prescribing a medication, like you
Right.
kind of have to understand what's the
Yes.
patient history, what's
Yeah.
like where do they come
Completely.
from, like do
Yeah.
they have
Yeah,
any background in this or that, any food allergies, like
Yeah.
Yeah, no, you're right. You can give them all sorts of medicine, but if you don't understand the issue, then you're not achieving anything. I think yeah, and I think also there's the delivery of services and what we do, and creating things. The thing that I love is actually learning, and I think as a designer, you have a period where you obviously are in education, you're learning, but as we've practiced through the years, if there's any part of my sort of rhythm of work where I actually think I'm just doing the same thing, I'm not actually learning, I feel quite hollow. And I think, and
Mhm.
maybe it is a thing about being, a little bit older now. I'm actually hungry for learning more than I've ever been, finding out
hmm
about places, people. The other thing is that people are fascinating. So when you work with incredible people, clients, it is fascinating. I mean, the experience that we have with our clients is incredible. We build relationships with people that start, you know, they're seeking a professional, an architect to deliver a service, and that's a professional engagement thing. All our clients become our friends. They build a relationship through a commitment to create something incredible that's more than transactional. It's about, they have to open themselves up to us. They have to put their selves on the table, and we have to understand if we're fashioning spaces for them, and they're not just houses. Even there's a retail project that I think this still aligns with, where that we have to understand their passions, their dislikes, their interests, their frustration, and so that understanding. And we talked about the understanding of place, and place is really important, but the understanding of people is so vital to when we're creating something that is so personal and so bespoke. That relationship and understanding of each other is so vital, but it's fascinating. We work with people who have done incredible things, in their professional lives. They've had experiences and seen and done things. So I just love, I love the first meeting when we start to, we've done the electronic emails. Are you interested in working together? Yes, we are. We exchange how we work, and then you have the first meeting. I just love the fact that I'm about to discover someone, that I'm about to find out who this person is, and we're on a journey that's going to be years long. It's pretty rare for one of our projects to be designed and delivered in anything shorter than a year. And so you start these relationships that that are going to have endurance and length, but it's incredible. Yeah.
Do you think any of the clients you've worked with who have become friends and you've learned about them very deeply through the process, do you think any of them had any inkling that the journey, the personal relationship journey with you guys was going to be that intense?
Yeah.
Let's say.
I don't know. I think people probably think about needing a house or needing a building or need,
Yeah.
I've got to, we need to put a new structure here. I need to find an architect. Let's have a meeting. Oh, they want us to tell what they want us to write down what we like. Okay, and so there's this sort of probably annoying. I just want a building, but they've got all these questions. What do they want to know if I get up early or not? I don't know. So there's this when you go to the doctor and you have to fill in those forms, and there's like 86 questions, and you just want to tick and get it done. I think we're even more painful. We are trying to understand. So I think they discover pretty quickly that we are very interactive. We're not passive. It's not just transactional. That we want to build and learn about them and what who they are, what excites them, how they operate. So but then there is this nice thing through the process sometimes where we end up that even though it's sometimes not needed, that they just want another meeting because they enjoy the time with us, and it's and that's nice. That there is a sense of the process and the relationship that we're building isn't just transactional. It is actually we've built a relationship, and we're delivering something together, and we're so fortunate because it does work, and then we have clients that come back and they want to do it again. And I think some clients are on to a third or fourth project with them, because they've enjoyed it so much. And that's not to say that every day's sunny. There's bumpy days, there's days where things are difficult, and you have to navigate all of those together. But if you've built a relationship of trust and common vision, it's a lot easier to deal with the bumpy days if everyone sort of knows where you're heading. And if the bad news is visible and everyone can see it and sort of figure out what to do about it, we try and avoid surprises. If there's news that's not what we thought it might be, we've got to get it on the table quickly so we can sort of together work out how to solve it. I think the bonds that we have built with our clients and the satisfaction we've had collectively about creating these things is so propelling for us to keep coming to work and wanting to do it again. Yeah.
I had a question about the different types of projects because I think actually in a way, on paper, you guys have, I'm sure for a lot of architects or some architects, kind of like the ideal practice, meaning to say it's high quality work. It's you're operating in different places. You get to learn a lot, like you talked about, and you get to work on different types of projects. And not all architects want to do different types of projects, but I think like most of them would enjoy at least dabbling. Let's say you're doing one or two of different things. My question is, did you find that certain types of projects are more challenging than others for certain reasons? So is doing like a commercial space more challenging than a house? Does a commercial project give you more freedom than a house? What are the differences that you experience?
I think I don't start to think that one's more complicated than the other. It depends on the client and who the client is and who the decision maker is. Sometimes with commercial projects, there isn't a easily defined decision maker where the bonds that we were talking about before can be so intimate and direct that you are designing for a group of people and that
committee.
And that's harder to navigate, so you have different processes. So sometimes that is different. But more often, the types of commercial projects that we work on and the scale of the commercial project means there is someone for us to be considered for the project and for it to be something that we're working on. I think people come to us because I think they know how we operate. So, and I think that we're very clear about the sort of the intimate sort of design discovery process that we want to have with a client. So unless it's a competition, and we sometimes do some competition work where that isn't so direct, but more often people in all sorts of work come to us because they've seen what we've done. They've had the benefit of meeting us and talking to us and understanding how we operate and how we design and how we like to work with our clients. So that's understood. I think I think about the different typologies we work on. They really still do have the same process, whether it's a small hotel or a retail space or a house in the mountains. We look at what the opportunity is, what we're trying to create. We try and imagine with the client what it might be, and that creative sort of generative thinking process is so important for all of those projects to sort of be excited together about what we might be trying to make. And then once that is formed and everyone has a sense of that vision, the execution, be it a house or a large commercial building, gets a plan. You need to step through these sort of arts. We need to understand these types of compliance. For larger buildings, it is more complex with fire and structure and other things, but those processes, they still exist for a house. There's a house has a number of arts through kitchen. I think I've had a meeting about a kitchen in a house that probably the amount of meetings I've had, I could have designed a sort of a tower, but because it's important, and it is, and
Yeah,
it is
yeah,
such a
yeah,
intimate thing for the client to sort of get right. So
yeah.
I and so that
There's a lot. There's a lot that goes into a kitchen for sure.
yeah, and so yeah, so they don't. I mean, they have very different sort of checklists, if that's the
Mm.
right term to move through, but but they need structure and edit and refinement all the way to the end. Yeah.
Is there a project that you haven't done, a building type you haven't done yet that you want to?
We're really fortunate because, I mean, a few years ago, people were sort of saying, what would you like to do? And back then, I think we were sort of saying, we'd love to work on sort of hotels, and now we are. So that's great. We're loving sort of
Hmm.
moving some of our sort of residential sort of sensibilities into sort of hotels, small lodging, and accommodation. So that's working really well. We love repurposing buildings. And sorry, this is stuff that we're doing.
Mm.
And those are all sorts of buildings. Like, so, we've converted warehouses to offices. There's a project that we've been approached to have a look at, which is actually a small office tower. I think it's 7 or 8 levels, that has no facade on it. It's a frame. It's been open to the environment for, I think, about 5 years. It looks like a war zone, but they want to know what we can do with this thing, which has a lot of embedded opportunity. The chassis, its frame, its the cost to start from ground up and discard this opportunity would be so wasteful. So that's exciting for us to sort of imagine how could we take something and reimagine it. And but we we I was going to say, we've talked about, I think, art galleries are places that we're fascinated by, but
Hmm.
we've been fortunate enough that some of our homes that we've designed have the most incredible art collections, that they are almost galleries in some
Yeah.
respects as well. I think there's definitely projects that we haven't done that, if the phone rang and they said it was one of these, we would be so excited because we haven't done one of those. But we don't feel wanting, which is a nice feeling. We don't feel like there is,
Hmm.
the spectrum of things that we're working across is so diverse at the moment, that there isn't a sense of gap. But saying that, if someone rings tomorrow and I don't know if it's a fire station or what, but there'll be something that we haven't done that will be so exciting because I don't know anything about fire trucks and their dimensions, because you build this understanding when you're designing spaces, for how
Yeah.
high is a ceiling height to feel comfortable for a human. What does a domestic garage look like? I've got no idea what a fire engine appliance dimensions are. And it was a little bit like, because we've done some aircraft or helicopter hangars before, but I was so fascinated because I thought helicopters were a lot lower than they are, because they look horizontal,
Hmm.
but they are very vertical. So, and then the other thing you've got to remember is it's not the dimension of the helicopter from the ground up, because it's got to get into the building, so it needs to go on a trolley or a trailer, and that's got a dimension. So we started designing this, and it's no, because you can't fly it in, so you got to sort of anyway.
Right.
So, but all of that learning and understanding the functional constraints and parameters, that's why a fire station would be fascinating, because I've got no, I'm trying to figure out what the dimensions are that we'd be dealing with, and yeah, no, we
Are you mostly working with an executive architect or architect of record, local architects, when you're doing work
yes.
abroad, or if it's a project type that's not a house?
Yes, we are. Yeah, so that's exactly how we operate and collaborate. Work within
Mm.
New Zealand and Australia. We do a lot of work in Australia, on the east coast of Australia. We deal with all of that in house. We don't need to build
Right.
that, but all our work in California, a new project in New York, the work that we've just
Hmm.
finished in South Korea have all been executed with the incredible talents of a local architect, and they are so valuable and such an important part of the success of the project. So to be a studio of 20 requires that collaboration is such an important part of
Yeah.
what we do. So yeah.
Uh, Pivoting to a question about yourself. If you weren't an architect, what would you be?
I don't know. I think I
Only an architect.
no, because I think sometimes it's not just architecture that we do. Sometimes it is actually, I think we are a creative studio where we imagine things and look at, once we've come up with an idea, look at how we might achieve it. And that could be all sorts of things. That could be
Mm,
that could be a business. It could be, oh, there's no business that does this, so maybe we should figure out how we do that. Or um, so I don't know if I'm explaining it correctly. We often go beyond just the architectural brief with our projects. Especially with the lodging and some of the we're imagining actually more than what the room might look like. What's the experience of how you get delivered to your room? What's the vehicle that you might come in? What's the sense of the attire the person might wear at the front desk? And there is
right.
this extension of experience that is definitely outside of our boundaries. But I think if I wasn't an architect, I don't think I could do anything where I don't have a imagination sort of or a creative process, because I'm constantly thinking of things, and not just architectural, but things that fascinate me, that might not be there, that could be created. And we're starting to look at product. We've started using the
Mm,
3D printer. We're printing and testing things that range from door hardware to lights, and then we've also started to look at bathroom furniture as well. And this is in its early days, but we're definitely fascinated by product as well, and so that's something we're developing. We have done some property development as well, because
oh,
um, we needed to find a new studio. Um, and so we found some warehouses and converted these warehouses to offices, but actually the warehouses were much larger than we needed. So with another partner, we became owners in a bigger scheme where we sort of built other tenancies and other spaces. So, and we loved that. So that 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 provided us to almost generate our own projects. So that
mm,
property developer sometimes has connotations of um, I think the way we imagine it extends the opportunity of being creative, to
hmm.
to execute projects that aren't client driven. That there are things that we
Hmm.
see, or bits of land, um, or things that fascinate us, where we might approach doing work that we actually do ourselves, or with a collective of sort of a small collective of like-minded people that have other talents in the construction and construction management area that we work with. So that's something that we have done and are doing, and are constantly interested in how And I think that's how cities and places are made. I think about, the opportunity for an architect to design and create a lot of the time comes from receiving an email or a phone call of someone saying, I would like you to build me one of these. And we build a relationship where, we respond to that request. The opportunity to make the request ourselves or initiate that opportunity ourselves is fascinating, because I think that's how great places and cities and towns are made, by people stimulating a desire to create. And part of me was thinking that actually, and we are so busy with doing what we do and loving what we do, but and this happens all around the world. You see the best parts of the cities that we live in, and the parts that aren't fantastic, and you think about what would make that place better, what's missing, and sometimes they're not significant things. They're just bits of missing infrastructure, or a general store, or a place for people to come together, or that there's a couple of blocks, but there's no sense of community because it doesn't have an amenity. So if part of what we do in the future is seeing these things and actually being responsible for initiating, through small developments, solutions or opportunities that enhance cities or communities, that does fascinate me. That we're not just waiting for someone else to come up with the idea to take that initiative, and that would be something that I think is a side job we're doing already. I'd like to potentially do more of it, but it's and I think that maybe means that as we've matured and we've got a fantastic sort of studio and ability to execute that energy, we can start looking at problems that exist and opportunities to make places greater and drive those opportunities independently of waiting for clients to ring and say, let's build one of these. And that may be too ambitious or too difficult to achieve, because it requires normally a lot of capital. It requires risk, development risk, and actually based in Auckland, but also just working around the world. It is so hard to achieve a good idea in most places. The resistance to compliance and.
What's the most challenging place you've worked in on that specific note?
I think everywhere has slightly, New Zealand has such an incredible natural beauty to build, and it is highly protected generally. But I'm so glad that it is, because the other outcome is that the natural beauty is diminished by the hierarchy of people building bad buildings that sort of don't have respect for it. So there is a sensitivity to it being actually a really important thing. But there is a sense, in a number of places, that the rules about cities developing, extending, and maturing have rules that are out of date, that don't respond to the demand for actually really affordable, good quality housing that's connected to good travel networks and people living in places that they want to be, not forced to the perimeter of cities, and their life is spent in their vehicle going backwards and forth because they can't afford to live, where they want to be. So that condition is actually in a lot of places. So, and You know, we're not going to change the rule book, but we are going to try and look at the rules and push the rules in some areas, and we're trying to do that where there is friction and there's an opportunity that needs to be challenged. So we think because if we don't do it, who's going to do it? Who's going to change cities?
Well, yeah, it's a really good point. I mean, I've kind of long said that I think we have some kind of alarm going off. This is buzzing in the background, but what would be great is if we could have a large body of those who are trained as architects or architects who are, on the right side of trying to make cities better, leave the profession of architecture and go into public policy. Yeah. That would really be the thing. If we could get a large number of architects to do that, that would make a huge impact, because unfortunately, and I don't want to go too far off on this tangent, but a lot of the ways these decisions are made regarding regulations and development, rules are, haphazard or not done by the right people who don't understand, even if they have the best intention, they don't understand all the things they have to understand.
Yeah.
So, I don't know how we do that, but that would be wonderful if that could take place.
Yeah. I think that it's international. Auckland is a beautiful city. It's got an incredible harbour. It's got these volcanoes and topography. Actually have two harbours, so its natural qualities are incredible. It's living in this part of the world. The built environment is very young. We don't have the architectural heritage of great cities of the world, and so it's a baby that needs to grow, and it needs to grow so well. But the nurturing of it is so terrible. It's sort of like if you looked at from a baby, and people talk about education and how you would bring up a child in the best possible way. If they applied that sort of thinking and that sensitivities to cities, you'd say, "Oh my God, it's terrible. How would no one? This child can't grow. It's awful. It has got no opportunity. It's got no ability to imagine a future because of the constraints." And that is sad. That is, because I think the world has a lot of pressure at the moment. There's so many problems to be solved. But if there was a sense of opportunity and optimism, so that the places that we all lived in had this sense of exciting vision for the future, and I don't just mean in 5-10 years, I mean in 30, 40, 50 years, so that our children and their children have a sense of where it might go. Those visions don't really exist. They exist spasmodically by different people throwing out their versions of it, but they're not very coordinated. They're not led,
True.
like you said, David, by a sort of a body of trusted people or authority. It's sort of the maturing of cities. I mean, the best parts of cities I can imagine really exist in either natural beauty or a period of architectural history that is 100 years old. The sophistication of building today and developing those cities have moments of greatness. There's some incredible buildings being executed around the world, but the overall vision for how those cities might develop and mature and an intergenerational move, I can't picture any of those visions being visible to me.
That's a really good, it's a somewhat depressing, but also a really accurate and I think good observation. That's, I'm gonna have to ponder on that one. I know we're coming up in the hour. One of my last comments I was going to say is, your bit about architect as developer, let's say, to put it succinctly. I think is a really good one, and it kind of flips the script. So earlier you were describing, when I asked you what you would be if you weren't an architect, and I thought your answer was great. It was sort of like the question leads you to whatever the answer needs to be. And I like the idea of an architect, the architect being a developer, because it's sort of the same thing. Instead of always having these guidelines that are given to you by a client, you are now proactively, as a person who sees a wider perspective and is thinking socially, culture, and all these things, then saying, okay, I'm witnessing this neighborhood or this city or this whatever. What does it need within my budget?
Yes.
And what can I do? And I think that's a very profound, it's a very profound different position for an architect to be in. Of course, the challenge is the money.
Yeah.
What we need is some kind of multi-billionaire who's just going to fund a bunch of us architects to do what I'm describing.
Yeah.
But I think it's an important. It could be a very impactful
Yeah,
thing.
and I think the opportunity with maturity and relationships and the people that we've built relationships with, we actually have it, on our phone, the connection to those billions. Those people actually, I know where a lot of money sits, and if those resources were targeted through a very conducted process, they would be good investments. They would be good investments socially, but I think they would also be good commercial investments for a pool of clients to put small amounts of their capital into into a pool for it to be directed. And that's sort of something I do wonder about as well. As a designer, as a person that has built a lot of relationships, that if you have a vision and you have a strong sense of opportunity socially, but commercially as well, you can collect these people and take them along on a journey. And I think that is an opportunity, and I think that is something that's on our mind. I think there is incredible wealth in the world, and I do wonder how people with a lot of that wealth might respond if there were very strong opportunities like the ones that we're discussing. If there was a sense of vision and opportunity, and someone was driving those opportunities with very strong outcomes, I think the support for it would actually be quite immense. If it just needs that sort of conducting. So and that sounds a little bit sort of amorphous because it's not site specific, it's not project specific, but I think about some of the people that have done great things in this city and the risks that they've taken and the visions that they've had for the city and how much better the city is for that sort of sense of ambition and opportunity. And so I'm thinking if part of what we do in the future is start to conduct small moves on those sort of fronts, that would be quite exciting, that we start to sort of look at these things and rather than waiting for the phone call, start to stimulate a little bit of the opportunity ourselves. Yeah.
I know Marina has a final question. I'll just respond real quick to what you said. So we actually started a development company earlier this year, and so we'll have to talk offline maybe. But part of the creating of it, aside from the personal satisfaction of having a bit more control over projects on occasion, is actually fundamentally for the purposes that you're describing, to try and figure out a vehicle for us to be more proactive. Yeah. And then use that vehicle for good reasons.
Yeah, and it's exciting when you have that thought and you you open gates that you feel that might exist because you've got these good ideas, but no one's rung you to sort of execute them. So you say, well, actually, we'll figure a way, and not to underestimate the financing and the risk that goes with it, because those are challenges. But back to the sort of, I think one of the discussions we had, we're all about problem solving. So, okay, so we need some money. How are we going to find the money? Oh, I know someone's got some money. So he's not going to put money in unless this is a really good idea. So that's we've got to make this a really good idea, and we've got to figure it out, and we've got to think about who's going to build it. And so it's all part of, the sort of the strategy of unlocking opportunity. But it's so rewarding, when we converted these warehouses to our offices, a sense of pride we had. We changed, we think, a neighborhood in the city, which was effectively dead to the street. There was actually no pavement. There was just grass and then the road. And then we activated the street. We put hospitality, we put retail, we put offices, and this piece of the city that was inactive became a vibrant little street, and that was so rewarding, and it is addictive because you say, "Oh, let's do it again. Let's find another,"
Right.
But yeah, so it's exciting that you guys are thinking the same thing, because I think that the opportunity of, if you have confidence that the ideas are good, you still have the challenge of all the parts that we spoke about. But those challenges, for me, just make me more hungry to do it. Like, okay, how do we solve that?
Right.
And let's start figuring it out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Final question, and it's kind of a tradition, is what is your favorite building? It could be one of yours.
That's usually the response we get.
Or it could be a different one. Yeah, sometimes we have, top 3 if people can't make up their mind. But
don't give people an easy out.
I have so many buildings. I think this doesn't answer the question, but I think it talks to some of the things we're talking about. I love the Marylebone High Street in London, and that is not a building; that is a place. We're fortunate that we do go to London quite a lot. Coming from a young country where the architectural heritage, as we sort of said, is not very old, to go to a place that has that sense of history, texture. It's on the threshold to Regent's Park, which I think is one of the most beautiful parks in the world. It has a sense of community within a broader city. It has hospitality, it has retail, but it has people living in dense quarters, and it is all coordinated into a space that I think is just special. So that
works.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
No, I like. That's a great answer.
Yeah.
That's a great
I
answer.
like
It's
that
very appropriate.
the favorite building is not a building.
I
It's
like
a place.
that. I like that a lot.
Place and experiences.
Tim, thank you so much for making the time in the future day, because you're ahead of us on your Thursday in this case. This was a lot of fun. It went by fast. I'd love to keep in touch.
Absolutely.
And if we do those project presentations, maybe you guys can be those architects to give a presentation.
We'd love to. And thank you for being interested in listening. And it's been great to talk to you both. And hopefully we can have a coffee in LA sometime shortly.
That works.
That sounds
fantastic.
Great.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for watching this video on YouTube. If you like what we're doing, then please support our show by hitting that subscribe button.
You can also find us on most of the social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We're mostly on Instagram. And you can reach out to the hotline, 21
213.
213-222-6950. You can send a text message or leave a voicemail if you have any reaction to this recording, any questions you might have, or guest suggestion. Feel free to send it our way.
Cool. Thank you for watching and see you next week.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.